All right. So have you ever like sat down meaning to get something done, and then like 3 hours later you realize you've just been watching cat videos on YouTube?
Oh, yeah.
Happens to the best of us, I think, right?
Yeah.
Well, luckily you brought us this guide,
Yes.
Mastering Focus, which I think we could all use a little bit more of. So
Definitely.
what some of the things that we can learn from this guide?
Well, it's so funny that you say that because I think we've all had that experience, right?
Yeah.
That sort of like, oh, I sat down
Yeah.
and, an hour later I've just been, scrolling through my phone or something like that.
Totally.
But this guide starts out by breaking it down and saying there are two different types of focus.
Okay.
So we've got scattered focus and then we've got directed focus.
Okay. What's the difference between those two?
Well, I think a lot of people are familiar with scatter focus, right?
Yeah.
It's when you're trying to do a million things at once.
Multitasking.
Yeah, exactly. You're, writing an email, you're texting a friend, you're also trying to, maybe like, scroll through social media
Sure, sure.
all at the same time. And what studies have found is that that actually makes us less efficient.
Really?
Yeah,
Interesting.
because our brains just aren't wired to handle that.
Okay.
And then we have directed focus, which is where you're giving your undivided attention to one thing.
Right. And that's like where the magic happens, where
That's where the productivity
the
happens.
productivity happens.
Yes.
Okay, so like less multitasking, more like singular focus on things.
Right.
How do we cultivate that though?
Well, it's interesting. This guide it has some very practical advice for this. So the first thing is all about eliminating distractions. So that means, silencing your notifications,
Yeah.
putting your phone on,
Do not disturb.
do not disturb, exactly. Decluttering your workspace.
Okay.
And then, minimizing interruptions as much as possible.
Oh, yeah.
You would be surprised how much even a little like ding
Oh, yeah.
can sort of throw your focus off,
Yeah, if you tell yourself like, oh, I can just peek at this one thing, and then you're down a rabbit hole
Exactly.
for 2 hours, and you're like, what happened to my afternoon?
Yeah, I think the reason for that is because, our brains love novelty.
Yeah.
And so every time we get like a notification or something like that,
Yeah.
that's like a little dopamine hit, which makes us feel good. And so it's like we get pulled in all these directions. It's like trying to read a book in a room full of flashing lights.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, so eliminating those distractions.
Yes.
What else? What else does this guide tell us to do?
The next thing is optimizing your physiology.
Okay.
So what that means is like taking care of your body,
Okay.
getting enough sleep,
Uh-huh.
exercising,
Right.
staying hydrated,
Okay.
eating brain foods.
Okay, so what are some brain foods?
Well, so blueberries are a good one. Fatty fish, like
Mm.
salmon, things like that. Nuts.
Okay, so like good fats
Exactly.
and good nutrients.
Right.
So it's not just mental, it's also like really
It's a holistic approach.
holistic. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So I guess, if you're running on fumes, your brain's not going to work,
Exactly.
and that's when you're susceptible to those
Distractions.
distractions and like going down those YouTube rabbit hole.
Right.
Okay, so that's great advice. What else? What else does it say?
Let's see. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting was this idea of training your focus like a muscle.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Like focus is a skill
Yeah.
that you can cultivate.
Absolutely.
It's not just something you're born with or
It's
you're
right.
not born with or without. Right.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And so, you wouldn't expect to run a marathon without training for it, right?
Oh.
So focus is the same way.
Okay.
And so what they recommend in this guide is starting small. Okay.
And then gradually increasing the duration.
Sure.
So maybe start with 15 minutes of dedicated work time.
Yeah.
And then, slowly bump it up to 20, then 25, and so on.
Okay, so like set a timer
Exactly.
for 15 minutes. Be like, okay, for these 15 minutes, I'm going to focus on this one thing.
Exactly.
And then you build up.
And then you build up your endurance over time.
I like that. That's good advice because I think a lot of people, they want to just sit down and be like, I'm going to do this for 4 hours.
Right.
And they just can't.
Right. And then they get discouraged.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what about breaks though? Like you can't just work all the time.
Right. So breaks are super important too.
Yeah.
But they're only effective
Yeah.
if you do them
Right.
in a way that allows your brain to really rest and recharge.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times what people do is they'll, take a break and then they'll scroll through the social media or.
Watch videos, which is actually keeping their mind engaged.
Yeah.
You're
Not really.
having it a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so this guide recommends doing things that really allow your brain to rest. So that could be like, going for a walk,
Okay.
meditating,
Uh-huh.
or just sitting in silence for a few minutes.
Okay, like not even reading, not even like listening to music, just
Yeah.
quiet.
Just give your brain a chance to really reset.
I like that. Okay. Anything else about breaks?
Well, have you ever heard of the Pomodoro technique?
Oh, yeah, the Pomodoro technique. I've been meaning to try that. Is that
Okay.
the one where it's like 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off?
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the beauty of that is that it breaks down these like big, overwhelming tasks
All right.
into these really manageable chunks.
Okay.
And then you repeat that cycle 4 times, and then you take a longer break, maybe like 20 to 30 minutes.
Oh. And one thing that the guide mentioned is that it's really important to kind of, tailor it to your own needs.
Okay.
So like you might be somebody who gets like, hyper focused and you forget to take breaks.
Right.
So maybe for you, it's like, shorter work intervals and longer break times.
Yeah.
So just experiment and see what works for you.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So it sounds like, what I'm hearing is that focus is a skill. It's not some magical ability. And while distractions are literally everywhere,
Yes.
there are things that we can do
Absolutely.
to combat them and to train our brains to be more focused.
Zach.
Is that
That's a great summary.
kind of the gist?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
So before we end this deep dive,
Yeah.
I'd love to leave you with one question, which is, what is one small change you can make today
Yeah.
to improve your focus based on what we've talked about?
Okay.
So maybe it's silencing your notifications for an hour. Maybe it's trying a Pomodoro session. Maybe it's just being more mindful of how you're spending your mental energy.
Yeah. No, that's great. Just take like one little step
Yeah.
towards better focus. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I am definitely feeling inspired
Yeah.
to be more focused and more productive.
Good.
So hopefully our listeners are as well.
Yeah.
Thanks to this great guide.
Yes.
And thanks to your awesome advice.
Of course.
This was really helpful.
Good. I'm glad.
And I hope everyone listening got a lot out of it.
Me too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. That's our deep dive
Yes.
for today. We'll see you next time.
Sounds good. Bye.